Is it colder out there?
Oh, yeah.
Trying to push the air.
They had
Next time.
Well, you told me large, so.
Yeah, I wear large.
Yeah, lots of large and extra large. The extra large is big.
no.
Marie or Maria, I pushed for. I'm gonna give my other. Good to see you.
Hi.
Neil.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, you're watching, yeah.
It's Maria Guarantee. It's my birthday.
Oh, you're.
Just sounds your
To you, happy birthday to you. Or it's birthday.
It's your birthday. I'm a horrible people. I
speech. Thank you.
Oh, that's so nice. Good to see the kitty.
I gotta go to center. Yeah, just long.
Plug it in.
Mara,
Where's it coming in? Oh, I didn't see it. Oh, wow, turn it on. That does better with time.
70s cars.
Just turn it one time.
It's just like a whole bottle of time. You need to shelter it up in the trailer.
Oh, it's on.
Oh, you saw my face.
Facebook.
Yeah. You see my message?
Yeah, I saw that.
We're gonna start with a verse just for that. I got a verse just for that, so we'll get started. We get started here in just a minute.
Happy birthday.
Sure.
My daughter was screaming. We had some real heavy
I know, it's what I was saying. I'm not gonna see next year. I'm not gonna see her.
You know, I'm stuck.
Maybe an hour.
You're right.
And what up, me?
I didn't realize that she was.
I had enough.
I see.
Yes, I got her. Don't steal. You know who's stealing my llama's time? He stole he stole all my llama's. I woke up and I'm like, I swear I felt it.
How you doing? They haven't done much with the air conditioning, I guess, so.
It's not as hot as it is outside.
That's true. I said they haven't done much with the air conditioning yet. Makes 2 weeks, I think.
Oh,
Thank you.
Yeah.
So we have to work it, but.
We got the fan bringing some cooler air in. Are you gonna see?
We're just spoiled, you know? Yeah.
Well, it's not 100 in here, so that's a big help. Not 100, so. Kim, are you at a breaking point where we can pray? So, all right, we're gonna go ahead and pray. I think we started, we're gonna be a few minutes yet on the coffee and all, but we'll go ahead and pray, so. Heavenly Father, Lord, I want to thank you again for giving us a place to meet tonight. Thank you for watching over us, Lord. We pray your blessing on our time together tonight. Just pray that you give us a good time of fellowship, Lord, in your word. We just pray you'd open it up to us through your spirit, Lord. Father, and we just hope that we can glorify Christ in all that we do here tonight. Help us to be a witness to those around us, Lord. Bless the YouTube broadcast as well. Help us to be a blessing to somebody there, people that are searching to Christ, encourage believers in their walk with you. And again, just bless all that's done here tonight for your glory. For it's in Jesus' name we pray. Amen. Amen. All right. Well, good to see everybody tonight. And it's like everybody's surviving. I do actually have a verse to start us out with tonight. So give me just a minute to get there. But yeah, as I mentioned, it's Lauren's birthday was yesterday, so.
Whose birthday is it?
Lauren's here. So there is a birthday cupcake cake over there. It's like a bunch of cupcakes all put together and like it's one cake. So that's over there. So that's, if you're wondering what she's doing over here, they gave her some things and she's going through them. So, all right. So we can sing happy birthday. So here we go. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear one. Happy birthday to you. So she's using the whole weekend for her birthday.
Yeah.
So,
Make it more. Make it more.
I'll just make sure I have my- yes. Oh, right. My verse I wanted to start us with tonight, and I think you'll understand why in a minute. 1 Peter chapter 2. Normally, I just, whoever has something to start with, but I figured tonight we need to start with 1 Peter chapter 2. 1 Peter chapter 2. And verse, we'll start in we're going to look at actually I'll just get out of verse number 9 here. 1 Peter chapter 2 and verse number 9. The Bible says, "But ye are a chosen generation, a royal priesthood, and holy nation, a peculiar people, that ye should show forth the praises of him who had called you out of darkness unto his marvelous light, which in time past were not a people, but are now the people of God, which had not obtained mercy, but now have obtained mercy." If you notice there in verse 9, we're described as a holy priesthood. So with that in mind, let me share something here. I mean, we want to do things as obediently as we can. We follow man's law when we can, when it doesn't conflict with God's word. We ought to obey God rather than men. We understand that principle. But there's a mandate that as of 6 o'clock applied in Summit County now about masks. And it even includes churches. But the governor's ordinance has a list of 13 exemptions for those who do not have to wear face masks. And in churches, the 13th exemption says that the requirement to wear a facial covering does not apply when, and here it is, individual is an officiant in a religious service. So this is a Bible study. So this is a religious service. Now, what did the Bible say that you are? Royal priesthood. A royal priesthood is composed of what? Priests. Are priests officiants in churches?
Yeah.
I rest my case. There we are. We have the governor's blessing. Let's go on ahead.
That's out of the way.
Hey, they did not define officiant. They left that up to the churches. We are Richfield Bible Baptist Church. We're a Bible-believing church. The Bible says we're a royal priesthood. Priesthood consists of priests. Priests are officiants. The governor said that officiants are exempted from the order. Therefore, if you want to wear a mask, you can wear a mask. If you don't want to wear a mask, you don't have to, because you're officially exempt by the directive own words. So there we go. In another occupation, I might have been a lawyer. So what can I say? But had too many scruples to go that route. So there we are. What was
The
that?
ones in California, they gotta wear masks.
That,
They can't sing.
well, yeah, they can't sing either. Yeah, you're right. They can't
Other
sing.
states, that other ones,
Yeah, California bans
even if they
singing.
sing, they gotta wear masks.
Yeah, in California, you're not allowed to sing at all. I'm just glad we're not in California, but I'm just thankful the
Amen.
governor once more gave us an exemption. So there we are. So if anybody, online decides that, hey, they didn't have face masks, we're all a royal priesthood.
For all the Karens out there.
For all the Karens out there, we're a royal priesthood. So how's that? All right, that was my thing to get us started here. So, because there was questions, so hey, decided to do some thought and some, got to figure out where we're at legally here. So there we are. Governor's mandate and the word of God coincide. We're all officiants. So. You have to have a little humor with these things, otherwise you go crazy, don't you? So. Steal some of Kim's water.
The way they're telling the way they're drawing up this color chart is pretty shocking from what I heard on the radio. They're basing it on cases, not deaths or infections.
Well, there's a reason that they're
or
doing that.
hospitalizations.
There's a reason they're basing it on cases, because,
It's totally fictitious.
however,
And one-
you gotta
one-
consider what constitutes a case. Most people think a case is if a person comes down with the coronavirus, that's a case. A positive test result is a confirmed case. Now, Kim's an RN. Say she goes someplace and she interacts with somebody who has the coronavirus, and she has to take a test because of that, and she tests positive. You would say, well, that's one case, right? I'm not being facetious with this. But in the meanwhile, she's come home, and since Laura and Christopher are with us right now, she's come home, so there's the three of us there at the house, and we're potential cases. So when they report the number of cases, they don't report one case, they report 4 cases. It's 1 confirmed and 3 potential. They're all cases. Now that 1 case becomes 4. Now Kim gets another test a week from now. She's another case. She comes home and I'm there. So I'm a potential case, so that's 2. And Laura and Christopher were there within 2 weeks, so that's 2 more potential cases. But then they're back with their grandparents, and they're now 2 potential cases. So now 1 person has accounted for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 cases, one person that was actually confirmed. And that's literally part of the reason the numbers are going up.
Amen.
Do you know what this new law is that this woman is putting in about the truth in reporting cases and the outcomes of the tests and so on? Something he's supposed to just start going through today. In Ohio.
That one I haven't read anything on yet, and I know they've had several things trying to get some truth in reporting, as it were.
Because there's a good reason for more and more people.
No, I think that's okay. I just needed to say. Now, the other thing, they got the cases going up, and people are getting tested, and you get positives. Sometimes there's false positives. They're still reported as a case. And it's, number of cases going up. So the number of deaths, though, right now, if you watch the news, you would think, oh, there's more people dying than ever before. Well, actually, probably cumulative, or if you could report the flu this way, just for the sake of argument, 1 million people, probably a million people, or maybe 100 million people in the United States have died from the flu. Did you know that?
Yeah, what period of time?
Well, since the entirety of the United States.
Oh.
Because when they're giving you the number of deaths, it's the entirety of this thing. So it's cumulative. Well, you go on long enough, there'll be a billion cases if the work carries that long. Because, it's cumulative. It keeps adding up. But the rate per 1,000 of people dying is about a third of what it was when it peaked back in April. And in April, there was no mask mandate. So why is there a mask mandate today when the death rate is far lower and the coronavirus that's spreading is now being considered by the CDC and the World Health Organization as no longer a pandemic? Did you hear the governor say it's not a pandemic? It's just an epidemic.
It never was a pandemic.
Well, pandemic has a definition that it increases certain numbers in certain, certain
It has to reach a certain number in a certain number of places.
certain number of things like that. It's more widespread is what it means. But at any rate, they're downgrading it, partly because the coronavirus that's circulating now is probably less lethal than the one that was circulating at the beginning of the year. In fact, back in February and March, I should say, we were reading articles that said that the first form of coronavirus was much more lethal, and it burned through its host, basically, because if the virus kills the host before it replicates and passes it on, it burns out. Like a fast-burning fire. You throw a lot of twigs and stuff that burns up quick, and it's burned up and it's gone. The long-burning one is the one that's less lethal, less people die from it, so more people survive with it, and it continues on more. And it appears to be going that route. So when they shut the economy down back in March, there was about 56 deaths from the coronavirus per day worldwide. You say, well, that sounds terrible. Well, Kim and I had dengue fever when we were in the Samoan Islands. Dengue fever ranked at 50 deaths per day. Tuberculosis was in excess of 4,000 or 5,000 deaths per day. Well, at the peak, the coronavirus did account for much more deaths per day. But when they shut everything down, it was barely above dengue fever. How many people here are deathly afraid of dengue fever? Anybody here ever had dengue fever? Kim and I have. So, dengue. you feel like you could use some Bengay because it's all your joints hurt. Well, generally speaking, there's a particular mosquito that carries it that recently has been found in northern, Illinois, I think it was. Northern Illinois or Indiana, somewhere in that area. So there's the off chance that it could make it into this area. Malaria used to be in this area. In fact, in the early days when Cleveland was just being settled, people were saying, who wants to live in a malaria-infested swamp like that? That used to be what Cleveland was back in the early 1800s. It was a malaria-infested swamp.
When they built the Ohio Canal.
Yeah, people died from malaria. When Abraham Lincoln was a young man and his family moved into southern Illinois, I think they moved out of Indiana because the malaria was so bad. So what we think of today oftentimes as these tropical diseases actually are a little more.
I'm sorry, I was just listening.
No, these tropical diseases are actually a little more. They were in some other areas, but it's just because we pushed them out of the more developed parts of the world. So they wound up in many of the third world countries and primarily in some of the tropical areas. So it's just where they've been more. So.
And what's interesting is there's non-safe people that are discerning this thing is
Sometimes
deception.
more than sane people. But go ahead.
Right. And he brought up an interesting point. He says, so it makes me wonder what's the motive,
Well,
which is exactly what he should be thinking
And then
critically.
his
People
name
need to
starts-
question more.
Last name starts with
well, they don't want you to ask questions because if you ask questions, you might find out that, let's see here. This was a quote by globalist theologian Lloyd Gearing in his book, The World to Come. He says, if the global society emerges, it will require humanity to develop a new consciousness and a new form of spirituality. If the human species is not to self-destruct, it must develop into a global society which will find cohesion in what may be called a global human. The challenges which lie ahead cannot be overcome by any one person or group working on their own, but only by the human species working as a whole. So he's arguing we need a global government there. Hey, now, with that, the same article that I'm reading from here, they cite Vera Alder, who wrote a book, a book called When Humanity Comes, and she said there's actually a plan and a purpose behind all creation. I read this quote on the radio today. World unity is the goal towards which evolution is moving. The world plan includes a world organization, a world economy, a world religion. Now, the reason I read this on the radio today is because Pope Francis has made a big call for interfaith prayer where everybody's praying to their own individual god or goddess or divine concept or idea for the elimination of the pandemic. Now remember, May 14th, he was supposed to have a big summit in Rome at the Vatican that was going to discuss two things. One was the need to educate people as to why we need a world government. And number two was to educate people of what we need to do to educate people that we need a world religion. Prior to that, back in March, he had scheduled a big summit that was to talk about why the world needs a world economic system. Did you catch what was in that thing she read? A world governance, the world government, a world economic system, and a world religion. The current Pope had major summits planned this year, but because the coronavirus, I believe it got out early. I don't think it was supposed to get out until this summer, but because it got out early, it preempted, I shouldn't say preempted, it delayed his meetings. We were supposed to have these meetings so that everybody would be prepped, that the world is going to face challenges that we cannot solve individually as individual nations, as individual religions, as individual organizations. We need to all come together with everything. The world needs to come together, one government, one monetary system, one religious system. Only then will we be able to face the challenges that lie ahead. Then, boom, this thing would have hit this summer. There was other UN-sponsored things that were supposed to take place. They were preempted as well. They were all scheduled till later this fall because of the coronavirus getting out early. Then the coronavirus would have hit, and people would have panicked. Oh, no. Hey, they have a plan. We need to listen to them. And there was a plan instituted, I believe, from what I've looked at. I think it was instituted at the Davos meeting in January, where a lot of different groups like Bill Gates and Melinda Gates, they meet there. Soros organizations meet there. The usual suspects, as Kim said. Various UN groups meet there. The various interfaith councils and things, they all meet there. All these international money groups, all these different groups meet there, the usual suspects. And they embarked on an ambitious 12 to 18 month plan in January to bring in a world government in 12 to 18 months. So they started the plan in January. They had all these meetings planned for this spring so that when this thing hit this summer, people would be prepped. And also it would coincide with the presidential election so that it would delay the election or prevent the election, or somehow they got to get rid of Trump because he's an obstacle to this. A lot of people don't realize not only is he promoted American nationalism, he's brought the Fed under the federal government. And this has been a major thing to rein in some of the international money people that are trying to bring us into a one world government. The Democrats, many of the top Democrats are working toward this government, this whole thing. They tried to put in the world, the cashless digital economic program into the stimulus bill. Nancy Pelosi tried to get that in there. She couldn't get it in there. They kept it from going in. That was back, in April or so? So all of this is coming together, but because the thing got out early, it kind of jumped the gun. And that's why they're so desperately trying to get us all worried about a second wave. And they don't want to tell you what the true death rate is. They don't want to tell you what a real case is because they need the numbers inflated. Now, what does that suggest? We see Governor Newsom, we see in California, Governor Cuomo in New York, and Governor, what's her name, up in Michigan. They're very clearly working toward getting everybody primed for this government, global government takeover. But what does that say about our beloved Governor DeWine, who ran as a Republican, conservative, pro-life, and now he's turned out that he was a stealth candidate for the global one world government, one world everything. People, because he's doing everything he can to keep Ohioans scared.
That's right.
Because the purpose of a mask, there are reasons to wear a mask from time to time. I have no problem with that. But the main purpose is when you go into a store, you go out in public, and everybody's wearing a mask, it looks scary. Well, there must be something, or these people wouldn't be wearing masks.
Right.
And it also, the ones who don't wear masks stand out. They're conditioning the people in the masks to attack, verbally attack in some way, to point out, to build animosity towards those who don't wear a mask. Many people here have experienced that animosity for not having a mask on.
Partial anonymity of those wearing the mask emboldens them.
Yeah, that works too, because you don't recognize them as easily. Why do bandits wear a face mask? So you don't recognize them. And there's a number of things that have come out showing how that soft torture, it's more psychological, not like pulling out fingernails or things like that, or branding irons. Soft torture. There's certain things that they do. One of them is socially isolate people. What did they do through this? You can't go anywhere. You have to stay away from people. They socially isolated the country. The other thing, try to take away your humanity. When you put a mask over somebody, a lot of our communication is done through body language, facial features, and things. When all you can see is the eyes, you can't see the mouth, you lose a lot of communication, one-on-one communication. And they know this. This is all part of the plan. Steve?
About the Lord too.
I'm sorry?
Telling others about the Lord, you can't do it alone.
Well, yeah, and along with that, story after story keeps coming out blaming Christians for the spread of the coronavirus. You can go gamble and go, woo, I won something. Or you can go to Walmart and say, hey, can you get this for me? But if you go to church and sing, you're going to kill grandma. You ever think about that?
Grandma had to come.
But you see what I'm saying? This is all, and when even the CDC and the World Health Organization says that it's dropping and it's no longer really a pandemic, why is Governor DeWine so insistent? And if you notice the tenor of what he says, well, we need to do this because people, haven't been doing what we've asked them to do. Because you've been out there, you've been bad boys and girls, you've been bad, naughty. Now we have to ground you again, possibly. Now we'll just do this, we'll single out the bad people in the bad counties, but they're adding to it. They just added Summit County, Lorain County, and all. And they're going to add more, just watch. They're probably going to add Medina County before it gets too long, and other counties. And they want to keep this going. Anybody have any clue when the face mandate's supposed to expire?
It's gonna get worse.
Anybody, yeah, has they said when it's going to expire? No.
I know they didn't say expiration.
No expiration date. Other things that they instituted in the past, if you remember, we're going to go 2 weeks, we're going to go 30 days. There's no expiration date on this. The best that I've heard is some health experts say, not until we get an effective vaccine.
That's ridiculous.
That might be never. And I heard somebody, I think it was last night I was watching, when somebody said, we need to find or change our culture so that the face mask is accepted and normal on a permanent basis. What are they doing? They're taking away your humanity.
We need to change our culture that we're not needlessly frightened.
It's a submission mask, is what it is. It's a mark of submission. And then I know a number of us have seen the thing circulating online that's got, first off, face mask required to come into this store. You can't buy or sell without a face mask. The next step, proof of vaccination required before you can buy or sell. The next step, digital ID on the back of the hand or on the forehead, like Revelation chapter 13, before you can buy or sell. Conditioning process. This is a conditioning process. They know what they're doing. They're trying to pull this out because if people are running around without face masks and people are healthy and they're enjoying life, the panic goes away. So how do you account for the fact that people are healthy? Well, you put masks on everybody and it makes it look like there's something to be scared of. You know, it's just, go ahead.
We know the world power is going to rise in Europe,
Mhm.
and you know it's coming. So what are you going to do too? We're just going to have to accept it, get ready for it.
Well,
I don't care if Trump gets in there or the Republican, it's still going down.
yeah, well, we do what we can to further the gospel and share the gospel because, like Steve D probably got a question about making it hard to witness because it's hard to hear what you're saying and all. But we still have to keep sharing Christ with a lost and dying world because that's the only thing that's going to save people. And mask isn't going to save people. There's times when masks are useful and sometimes even necessary. I mean, I want my dentist wearing a mask when he's staring me in the face, you know. But But he wears a mask that's a little better than a cloth mask anyways, for that purpose. But ultimately, Jesus said in, where was it? I had it here earlier because I had it on the radio today.
It has to do with four horsemen and pestilence and all that.
Well, I was going to say when in Luke, and he also said it in Mark 13, but Luke 21, and when you see these things begin to come to pass, then look up and lift up your heads, for your redemption draweth nigh. And he talks about the events that he had talked about the events that would take place during the tribulation period. And he talked about the in Mark chapter 13, he talked about the wars and rumors of wars and all these different things. And we saw in 1 Thessalonians chapter 5 when he said it talked about like a woman in travail. They're getting closer and closer. I read an article last night. Idaho has not ceased to have. It said Idaho hasn't stopped shaking since I think it's February. They had one of the biggest earthquakes ever recorded in Idaho back earlier this year. And they have had multiple tremors and aftershocks and other earthquakes, more than they've ever recorded in Idaho. And it just keeps happening, tremor after tremor.
Does that have to do with that silent volcano up in
Well, that's there's that super volcano that they have in Yellowstone. And that's a little further away. This is a different source on this one. And there's things going on there, seismic activity and areas where the ground is lifting. And then, of course, we talked about the locust plague in North Africa going up into the Middle East, all the way up to Pakistan and India. And back in February, it was the worst in decades. And then in June, they were saying that it's now a couple thousand times more than what it was back then in terms of the spread and the number of the locusts. So they're just devastating. The UN is predicting famine in that part of the world because they come in within a few minutes. The whole you have a field of wheat or whatever out there, and within minutes they land on it and they just devour it. It's gone, and then they move on. There's nothing there. And they just devour everything. It's an incredible. Even secular sources are calling it a plague of biblical portions. And
just not the Bible, but the Christian.
Yeah, but also there's wars and rumors of wars. I was mentioning on the radio today about these mysterious explosions that they're having at the Iranian missile facilities. And they just keep happening. Amazing, isn't it? I couldn't imagine who might be behind that. But these missile facilities, they're producing missiles that they want to rain on Israel because the Iranians believe that Israel needs to be totally destroyed. And there's still reports that Iranian soldiers are wearing Syrian military uniforms and their numbers are building up in southern Syria.
Israel.
Yeah, but you see what I'm saying is there's growing rumors of a major Middle Eastern war on the horizon. And then, of course, the wars and rumors of wars. We talked before about China and India, where they're having increased tension, China and India. And there's increased tension between North and South Korea and wars and rumors of wars.
Egypt and was it Somalia or Ethiopia?
Well, Ethiopia would be on the border, I believe, of Egypt. Yeah, because I'm trying to remember which was first, because it used to all be called Ethiopia in the Bible. Everything below a certain point was called below Egypt.
Yeah, because they put this dam up, and it's basically choking out the Delta Nile.
Well, yeah, because the Nile doesn't get the flooding that it used to get, because they get that large dam now, the Aswan Dam.
Yeah, but they control that.
Yeah, and Egypt has it. Lake Nasser, I think it is, after the one Egyptian leader at the time. And that is probably going to be key in the destruction of Egypt, because we've talked about how the Bible talks about Egypt being destroyed and actually uninhabitable for 40 years, which is kind of interesting when you think about it. Let's see if I can find it real quick. I think it's in, try Isaiah.
He's on, and he's, well, he brought this Israel 5 days a week. Ethiopia put up a dam, and it's literally just, all of a sudden, Lake Nashville started to roll.
Oh, are you talking about another dam, not the Ashland dam?
No, not that one. This dam is behind Lake Nashville.
Oh, they're
Lake Nashville-
preventing water from going into the lake.
Right.
Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't.
Lake Nashville, they can't have that natural flooding like you were talking about. They said once a year they'll open it up.
Let some water flood
Yeah,
out.
lots of them.
Okay. Yeah.
And lately they haven't been able to do that. Egypt is complaining to the UN, and the UN's like, what are you gonna do? You know, what do you want us to do? I'm like, okay.
I'm trying to find this one passage here. I thought it was Isaiah 19. It's not that. That's a different one dealing with Isaiah. Or I'm sorry, dealing with Egypt. Haven't looked at this for a while here, so let's try and. Okay. Ezekiel 29. All right, Ezekiel 29. It's an interesting prophecy. It's been a little while since we looked at it, but it says in Ezekiel 29, starting in verse 1, in the 10th year, in the 10th month, in the 12th day of the month, the word of the Lord came unto me, saying, Son of man, set thy face against Pharaoh, king of Egypt, and prophesy against him and against all Egypt. So we understand that this is going to be a prophecy directed, by God, telling what's going to happen to Egypt, and it's a judgment on Egypt because of what they had done. And a little further down here, let's see. We have a situation where he says, starting in verse 8, it says, Therefore thus saith the Lord God, Behold, I will bring a sword upon thee, and cut off man and beast out of thee. And the land of Egypt shall be desolate and waste. And they shall know that I am the Lord, because he hath said, The river is mine, excuse me, and I have made it. Behold, therefore, I am against thee and against thy rivers, and I will make the land of Egypt utterly waste and desolate, from the tower of Sin even unto the border of Ethiopia. No foot of man shall pass through it, nor foot of beast shall pass through it, neither shall it be inhabited for 40 years. Now let me pause there for a second. The next verse, let me read the next verse, verse 12 as well. And I will make the land of Egypt desolate in the midst of the countries that are desolate, and her cities among the cities that are laid waste shall be desolate 40 years. And I will scatter the Egyptians among the nations, and will disperse them through the countries. Yet thus saith the Lord God, at the end of 40 years will I gather the Egyptians from the people whither they were scattered. And I will bring again the captivity of Egypt, and will cause them to return into the land of Pathros, into the land of their habitation, and they shall be there a base kingdom. Now, one of the things with Bible prophecies, sometimes things take place and they have a partial fulfillment, and then there's a larger fulfillment. But another thing that you notice with Bible prophecy, sometimes they'll say in the latter days or in the last days. Well, that's a time clue that it's for the time before, the Lord returns and sets up his kingdom. So we understand that. And this didn't say in the latter days, in the last days, but there's another way of understanding Bible prophecy. If you cannot find an event in history that matches what is prophesied, then it hasn't happened yet. Okay? Now, people have come up with ways to explain this as having happened. I forget who the guy was. Some guy conquered a chunk of Egypt and redispersed people, and they said that was it. Well, the problem with that is it says there in verse 11, no foot of man shall pass through it, nor foot of beast shall pass through it, neither shall it be inhabited 40 years. Well, when that guy controlled the area, there was man and beast passing all through there. So it didn't take place. So this prophecy has yet to be fulfilled. There is not a period in time. Did you have something here? Yes.
Nuclear fallout to keep people from
Exactly. So there's not been a time in the past when this has taken place. So this must be yet something that's going to happen. Now, the different things that are going on, the Prime Minister of Israel is talking about putting forth the legislation and all, so they will formally annex in a portion of the West Bank territories. Now, keep in mind, they call them the disputed territories. They call them the occupied territories. The reason for that, and this has those, those non-biblical places like Bethlehem and Judea, things like that you've never seen in your Bible, have you? I don't know how the Jews think they have any connection to Bethlehem and Judea. I just can't imagine where they get that from. Obviously, I'm being tongue-in-cheek here, but in 1948, when Israel declared itself an independent sovereign state, what happened was, let me go back again, the Balfour Declaration toward the end of World War II set aside a homeland for the Jewish people. Now, where did the Jewish people originate? Right there. And Jerusalem, Judea, and what became Samaria and all that. That was Israel and Judah, the southern kingdom. That was where King David was. That's the land that Abraham traveled to. And God said he would make it for his descendants. And so, at any rate, that's their home. That's their ancestral homeland. So they set aside this area that encompasses all of modern-day Israel today. It also included the West Bank territories. It also included everything that encompasses Jordan today. But in the 1920s, in order to bring peace to the region, they did a two-state, tell me if any of this sounds familiar. They did a two-state solution where Israel gave up land for peace. And it was supposed to bring acceptance by the Muslims of the Jewish state. That really worked out well, didn't it? So they created, out of whole cloth, actually out of Israel, they took 3/4 of the land set aside for a Jewish state, and they made yet another Arab Muslim state, and they called it Transjordan because it was on the east side of the Jordan River. Israel, by the time we got to the end of World War II, and by the time we got down to around 1948, the UN now was being plagued with what to do with the unrest in Palestine, because the place was called Palestine at that time. And they said, the Jews and the Muslims are fighting with each other. We got a great idea. This is something nobody's thought of it before. It's so good. We're going to come up with a two-state solution, and we're going to have Israel give away land for peace, and that'll bring peace to the Middle East. Wow. Israel said at this rate, there's going to be nothing left for us. So they declared themselves a sovereign state in 1948. Immediately, the nations around them, the Muslim nations, attacked. And in the process of the attack, Jordan came across the international border set by the world of the Jordan River. They crossed the Jordan to the west side of the Jordan River, and they seized a huge chunk of Israel, including Jerusalem. Then, finally, later on, what was it, 1968 war, I think it was, or 67, which was the one where they gained Jerusalem back. Off the top of my head, I don't remember which one it was, but 67?
Was that 3-day war?
Yeah, the 3-day war. The 3-day war, Israel captured Jerusalem, captured the West Bank territories, pushed Jordan back across the Jordan River, where it had been before by international mandate. And then all of a sudden, Israel stole the West Bank, and they called it the occupied territories. It was their land. The international community reserved it for them. They didn't take Jordan, which was also their land according to the international community at one point. And so now they've got control of the occupied territory. They like saying it that way because it looks like Israel's there illegally. Jordan was the one there illegally. So, of course, you know, there's these different things. We've got to come up with something unique that'll bring peace to the Middle East. Something nobody's thought of before.
Get rid of all the Arabs?
No, we're going to have a 2-state solution. And Israel's going to give up land for peace. Why nobody's thought of this before? It's amazing. Except every time it's been tried, it doesn't work. Now,
Well, that's like in 73 when they took the entire Sinai Peninsula.
and they gave it back for peace with Egypt. They gave it back for peace. Well, they have a temporary peace with Egypt right now over that because they could have captured Egypt entirely, but they only occupied the Sinai Peninsula. So, but anyway, looking at this area, the West Bank territories are divided into 3 administrative regions. One is totally under the control of the Palestinian Authority. One is basically under the control of the Israeli government. The Israeli plan is to bring that portion, that one that is totally under control of the Israeli government, fully into Israel. And I'm not 100% sure on this, but I think also part of the second region that's not fully under the control of the Palestinian Authority. But even
It's supposed to be
so,
done in July
yeah,
1st.
July the 1st was the earliest that they could institute the legislation to do it, but Netanyahu agreed to hold off, but there's still, the current plan is still to do it by the end of the month. Now, what has happened as a result of that, Jordan basically has indicated that it might mean war. Iran has said it will mean war. Egypt has indicated it might mean war. Syria has indicated it might mean war. Turkey has said it will mean war. And on and on and on. So, again, rumors of war.
That's right.
And God has a plan. He knows what's going on.
That's right.
Yeah. Now, getting back to what we read in Ezekiel chapter 29. If you hold your finger there and go back to Psalm 83. Psalm 83 is probably one of the least known major battles. I'm sorry?
They didn't want to push them into sea.
Yeah.
That's even in all their
Their agenda, their
yeah,
charters.
they write down in there.
Exactly. In fact, I think it's the Hezbollah one we looked up for Hamas, or actually both of them have it, but one of them has almost the exact words that's in Isaiah 83. This battle here, again, has not yet taken place, as described in Isaiah 83. Isaiah 83 starts out, Isaiah 83 starting verse 1, keep not thou silence, O God, hold not thy peace, and be not still, O God, for lo, thine enemies make a tumult, and they that hate thee have lifted up the head. They have taken crafty counsel against thy people, meaning against the Jewish people, and consulted against thy hidden ones. They have said, come, and let us cut them off from being a nation, that the name of Israel may be no more in remembrance. That could have been lifted from Hamas or Hezbollah right there. And it isn't it interesting? It's, yeah, who's very anti-Semitic and anti-Israel. But think about this for a minute. This is talking about something that's going to happen in the latter days, and they called the name of Israel, not Judah or something else, or Palestine. They said specifically the name of Israel. The name of Israel, nobody knew that it was going to be Israel until in 1948 when they declared themselves a state, because President Truman, after being told by the State Department, told by all his advisors, do not recognize this new Jewish state. And sitting alone in the White House, he already had a telegraph cable prepared that said the United States recognizes the new Jewish state. And he penciled out Jewish state and he put Israel over top of it. Israel. Of all names, they went with Israel. It's the exact name that's in Psalm 83 of a future group that's going to say, let's stamp out let's cut them off from being a nation, that the name of Israel may be no more in remembrance. That's what Hezbollah and Hamas are dedicated to. Palestinian Authority is dedicated to that. Iran is dedicated to that.
They said they they're not gonna sign for it, they're gonna lose everything.
Uh-huh.
And
So-
if that's when the war will come up.
Exactly. And in Psalm 83, as it goes through these different ones that consulted together, here verse 5, for they have consulted together with one consent, they are confederate against thee, the tabernacles of Edom and the Ishmaelites of Moab and the Hagarenes, Gebel and Ammon and Amalek, the Philistines with the inhabitants of Tyre. Asher also is joined with them. They have opened the children of Lot, Selah. Basically, those areas there, what they give us is, Amalek is up where Assyria was, which encompasses much of Syria and parts of Turkey. We've got the Philistines. Well, the Philistines were where the Gaza Strip is located. We have got the inhabitants of Tyre. That's in Lebanon. We've got Edom and Moab, or I'm sorry, Edom, that would be where the Sinai Peninsula, which belongs to Egypt, is located. You've got Moab, which is where Jordan is. Basically, what we have here are in the Hagarenes and the children of Lot. Remember, Lot was the nephew of Abraham. So we're covering we're covering a circle around Israel.
King Solomon was on the throne. That's how far the Jewish state extended to.
Yeah, they ruled over many of these areas at that time because he had an empire that wasn't just Israel, but they ruled. I remember he married many wives because he made treaties with all the surrounding kings, and then they became subordinate to the Jewish empire. And he married the wife, so now they have peace because that's the way they did things. But what I was going to say is, the battle that people talk about in Ezekiel 38 doesn't mention these countries. They're left out. They're not left out because, they could only put so many in. They're left out because what happens to them in Psalm 83? He says in verse 9, do unto them as unto the Midianites, as to Sisera, as to Jabin at the brook of Kison, which perished at Endor. They became as dung for the earth. make their nobles like Orb and like Zeb, yea, all their princes as Zebah and Zalmunna. And you read about them in Judges and different things. These people were all destroyed. And who said, let us take to ourselves the houses of God in possession. Oh my God, let them, make them like a wheel, as the stubble before the wind, as the fire burneth the wood, as the flame setteth the mountains on fire. So persecute them with thy tempest, make them afraid with thy storm. Fill their faces with shame, that they may seek thy name, O Lord. Let them be confounded and troubled forever. Yea, let them be put out to shame and perish, that men may know that thou, whose name alone is Jehovah, art the most high over all the earth. Basically, much of these areas are just totally destroyed. Now, there's a lot of passages that indicate that all these areas at one time or another are going to be destroyed, and in many cases uninhabitable. And Egypt, that we were reading about in Ezekiel chapter 29, Egypt is a nation that becomes uninhabitable. Now, if Egypt is destroyed and uninhabitable, that would be a good reason why it's not mentioned in Ezekiel 38 in that future battle, because it's not around to battle. And the same thing with Syria. Syria, back in I think it's Isaiah chapter 17, talks about Damascus being destroyed in one night. One of the oldest continually occupied cities in the world is destroyed in one night. In the morning, in the evening or whatever, it's there, and in the morning it's not. Now, to destroy a major city in one night, they didn't have the technology back then, but we do today. Somebody mentioned the nuclear, right? Somebody mentioned nuclear weapons earlier. I forget who. But a nuclear weapons could certainly destroy Damascus in one night, couldn't it? Pretty easily. Well, we come back to Ezekiel chapter 29 with the destruction of Egypt. So you've got Israel sitting there, and if they're attacked by all these countries confederate around them, then we're going to wipe out Israel from the face of the earth, and that's what their battle plan is. Israel's defense plans right now is the Samson principle. What did Samson do to his enemies? He said, well, if I'm going down, they're all going down with me, didn't he?
He brought the house down.
He brought the house down. And they will, if they feel that their nation is about to be destroyed, they have said they will take all their enemies down with them. Now, you've got the Aswan Dam, which is one of the largest earthen dams in the world. It's not a concrete dam like the Hoover Dam. Have you ever seen the Hoover Dam? Big concrete structure, and it's pretty impressive. And now, it would only take a few strategically placed bombs to blow that open, because it's a concrete dam. But the Aswan Dam is an earthen dam. You couldn't just set off even a small nuclear bomb on the surface of the dam. Is not going to do much to it, because most of the force of the explosion is going to be reflected away and not do a whole lot of structural damage to it. But it says here in Ezekiel 29, in verse 10, he says, behold, therefore I'm against thee, against thy rivers, and I will make the land of Egypt utterly waste and desolate from the tower of Seine, even unto the border of Ethiopia. Seine, there's been some curiosity about what this is really referring to, and I've looked at various things and claims that it's here and there, but it refers to the area where the Aswan Dam is. Well, a tower is a man-made structure that's pretty high. Well, wouldn't you consider the Aswan Dam a man-made structure that's pretty high?
Yes.
I think that's what it's talking about personally, from my looking at it. Israel has the capability, with a few, it wouldn't take but probably 3 or 4 burrowing nuclear warheads that burrow 100 feet into the dam and blow up inside of the dam. You know, across the face of the dam. It's a pretty wide dam. So if you blew them up inside the dam, that's bigger than on the surface. The surface isn't going to do a whole lot of lasting damage. But inside of it, if you can breach the dam, now nuclear fallout's an interesting thing. In the air, it goes and it drifts down and it follows the air currents. But if you blew up the dam, the nuclear fallout, clay particles are sticky, and the radioactive particles stick to the clay particles. So what do you now have flowing downstream from the Tower of Satan?
Radioactive.
A river of radioactive mud. Within a couple hours, 2-3 hours, it'll reach Cairo, and from Cairo, it'll spread down and out the Sinai, the Nile Delta.
Fertilized?
It'll spread out, and you'll have a massive flood. So it goes over the banks, and it just covers everything with radioactive mud. The vast majority of the Egyptian population lives in the Nile Valley and the Nile Delta. Where are they going to go?
Many of them might have time to flee.
And they're not going to be able to come back until it's safe. That would explain how they can have to leave for 40 years. Because it's just not safe to be there. It's radioactive. You can't. How many people live in Chernobyl right now? And when did that occur? I was in England in the 1980s. I was stationed at RAF Chicksands.
If they live there, they don't live there for long.
Yeah, no. But we had the radiation cloud go over our base. They measured it. And we used to joke, well, it's easy to tell what produce was contaminated. Just do your grocery shopping at night. If the carrots, if the cucumbers glow or whatever, hey, don't buy it. So, it's really, it's a desolate area. They go in there and they do studies periodically, but nobody lives there because it's contaminated. So what would happen to Egypt? They have to leave. And the interesting thing is, he says they have to live in other countries. This would be a good reason why Egypt's not an active player in the Ezekiel 38 battle, isn't it? So if that's the case, this battle here, I think, has to take place. The Psalm 83 battle, I think, has to take place before the Ezekiel 38 battle, because I think that has to take out that ring of states that's around Israel that aren't mentioned in Ezekiel 38. And as a consequence, when this takes place, imagine what that's going to do to the world stock markets. To see a major, because this basically amounts to a regional nuclear war. Once nuclear missiles start going back and forth. In Iran, I just read this afternoon, they say that their enrichment processes, the latest thing now, barring any other explosions, they're about 6 months from having enough material to make their own nuclear bomb. Well, they don't have to wait that long. Most people don't realize the North Korean nuclear program is also the Iranian nuclear program, because at all those test sites in North Korea and all those test shots of missiles, there's Iranian technicians and military people there. So they're already working. The missiles that they have that can now reach Israel, actually they can reach up into pretty much all of Europe now. The missile technology came from North Korea. North Korea got it from China. China got it when Al Gore drank too much iced tea and had to use the restroom. Remember that thing when they asked, you were at the meeting with the Chinese, how did they get this material? Well, I don't remember that happening. I drank a lot of iced tea. I must have been in the restroom. So here, get the vice president to drink some more iced tea so he has to leave the room so we can get our secret deals passed. Yeah, right. The Clinton White House gave China missile technology that was not to be given to them. The Chinese made it available to the North Koreans. The North Koreans made it available to the Iranians, and now the Iranians have the capability, if they put a nuclear weapon warhead on it, to reach all Israel as well as up into Europe. Or put it on a container ship and sit about 100, 150 miles off the coast of the United States, send it up into the air on the exact trajectory that they practice doing, and blow it up and cause an electromagnetic pulse attack to take out the electronics on the eastern seaboard of the United States. Do it there, do it in the Gulf of Mexico at the same time, you would have quite an impact. You would devastate this country. Well, at any rate, but just looking at, again, with Egypt here, this battle has to take place. And if this battle takes place, we've got wars and rumors of wars. And what did Jesus say? When you see these things not happen, begin to happen, he says, then look up and lift up your heads, for your redemption draweth nigh. That tells me, and we talked about this a few weeks ago, remember the idea, if we're in the last hours of the last days, how would we know it? We now have that ability that take place. Yeah,
Someone told me talking about the abomination of
Desolation.
desolation.
Uh-huh.
To occur before Jesus comes back.
Yeah, and that's referring to Jesus coming back at the end of the tribulation. That's spoken of by Daniel. Daniel chapter 9, when the Antichrist causes the sacrifices and the oblations to cease, which means that a temple has to be rebuilt. Yeah, that's not before the rapture takes place. That's before he comes back to the earth and sets up the millennial kingdom. Because you can see that in Daniel chapter 9. Let me turn over there. Daniel chapter 9, where if you notice what he talks about here, 70 weeks, Daniel chapter 9 and verse 24, 70 weeks are determined upon thy people and upon thy holy city. Pause there for a moment. The 70 weeks, okay, again, another principle in Bible interpretation is if the plain sense makes common sense, seek no other sense. That makes sense, right? But now sometimes things are a little more symbolic or a little more representative. And as you go through this, we know that these things did not take place in 70 actual weeks of days. The weeks are periods of sevens. They call them heptads for 7. And they know from calculating the things here from when Jesus entered into Jerusalem and when he was cut off and crucified, that this is not 7 weeks of days, these are weeks of years. So each week represents 7 years. So this 70 weeks, this is literally 70 times 7 years. 70 weeks of years. Okay? But notice what it says there in verse 24 where he continues. He says, 70 weeks are determined upon thy people, upon thy holy city, to finish the transgression, and to make an end of sins, and to make reconciliation for iniquity, and to bring in everlasting righteousness, and to seal up the vision and prophecy, and, notice the last phrase there, and to anoint the most holy. Well, that's Jesus sitting on the throne, the millennial kingdom. That's Jesus to sit as King of Kings and Lord of Lords. This hasn't happened yet. So obviously this wasn't 70 weeks of days, or Jesus would already be ruling as King of Kings and Lord of Lords, but that didn't happen yet. So as it continues, he gives some discussion here, and we're not going to go through all of the numbers, but he says in verse 25, know therefore and understand that from the going forth of the commandment to restore and build Jerusalem, Unto Messiah the Prince shall be 7 weeks and 62 weeks. The street shall be built again, and the wall, even in troublous times. And after 62 weeks shall Messiah be cut off. Notice what he says, but not for himself. Now, Messiah came, and he was cut off. Was he cut off because of sins that he did? No. He was cut off for sins we did. So he wasn't cut off for himself. He was cut off for us. He was cut off so that he could sacrifice himself to purchase our salvation. So there's the crucifixion there, cut off, but not for himself. And then he says, and the people of the prince that shall come shall destroy the city and the sanctuary. Well, okay, this happens after Messiah is cut off. When was the temple and sanctuary destroyed after Jesus was crucified? The year 70. And who did it? The Romans. The Romans destroyed under Titus. They destroyed the temple and they destroyed Jerusalem in the year 70. Okay? And then he says, and the end thereof shall be with a flood, unto the war, or unto the end of the war, desolations are determined. Verse 27, and he, that's the prince of the people that shall come in the previous verse. Okay? This prince, this leader of the people that comes out of the people that destroy the temple and the sanctuary. This is where we get the Antichrist coming out of Europe, out of the Roman Empire. Because it says, and he shall confirm the covenant with many for 1 week. This is the 7 years of the tribulation period. So what happened was Messiah was cut off. After that, there was an interruption in the 70 weeks. 69 weeks took place. 1 week of years is yet to take place. That week of years begins when the Antichrist, the prince of the people that destroyed the temple, when that individual signs, confirms his covenant, whatever it is, confirms the covenant with many, meaning many of the Jewish people, because he's talking about prophecy in regards to the Jewish people. He confirms a covenant with many for 1 week. This will be a 7-week or 7-year covenant. Now, of course, we're talking about Jewish years, or 360 days, as opposed to our 365, except for leap year, we have an extra year. But these are Jewish years, 360 days, and this, there's a couple things that's interesting with this. You say, well, how could the Muslims go along with this? Simple. Muhammad signed a treaty with the Meccan, or not the Meccans, it was a Jewish tribe that begins with a Q. I can't think of it right now. Sorry. Anyway, he signed this treaty with them for 10 years that they would have peace. And then after they got comfortable and thought, well, 10 years living with Muhammad and his followers, we don't have to worry about them. What he did is he went in and slaughtered them. He established a principle that lives in Islam today. The principle in Islam today is you can make any agreement you want to peace with your enemy, as long as it doesn't go over 10 years, and you can break it anytime you want to, because you're following the perfect example of the most perfect man that ever lived, Muhammad the Prophet. And if Muhammad can do it, you can do it because it's okay. So a 7-year covenant is well within the 10 years. The Muslims can say, oh, sure, we'll take that. And never fully intend to keep it, of course, but they can do it. Huh? Yeah. So this is where some people believe that the Antichrist could actually be a Muslim leader, because he could sign this. He wouldn't have any problem. But it doesn't have to be. They could go along with it. And so if we have this situation that happens where the Psalm 83 battle takes place, And the world is thrown into confusion. You think we saw a stock market crash when we did the shutdown in March worldwide? This thing, the stock market, would make all of the previous ones look like rallies. And the price of energy would shoot up, shortages, you'd think you were missing stuff on the shelf then. In the midst of all this, because what's this going to do to the world oil industry? Oh, by the way, Israel just discovered that they have huge oil reserves. It was just in the news. Absolutely stunning numbers that are coming in. They might be able to rival Saudi Arabia now. This is amazing. Not found until just now. There have been rumors. There's an oil company, oil and gas exploration company, Zion Oil or something. Oil and gas has been explored for years, but
I think they're the ones at the 18,000 foot mark.
yeah. So they found huge reserve. They just found gas out in the Mediterranean Sea, so huge gas reserve. So Israel may be the only area only place that survives with oil and gas reserves. And wouldn't that make them interesting to Russia and the Turks and the Iranians to come in and take a plunder from them? But at the same time, though, because oil and gas are worldwide commodities, even though right now we're the biggest energy producer, the biggest energy exporter in the world, it's going to send the whole energy market worldwide into shock.
But isn't our oil not as good as quality as Saudi Arabia?
Depends on where you get it from. The oil sands and the oil tars that we have out west and they have up in Western Canada, that is not as good because they have what they call sweet crude and different things. The amount of heavy crude, it's got the amount of sulfur and stuff that's in it, I believe. Just like with coal, some coal is better than others because it like the what is this?
Anthracite coal doesn't have sulfur.
Yeah, anthracite's the best, I think, because it's harder and it burns hotter and it doesn't have the sulfur. And so there's different degrees of oil as well.
What about Israel oil?
I don't know. I don't know what quality it is. It's supposed to be real good quality. Well, that would seem to be fitting, wouldn't it? That God would see to it that they have some good
That
food.
Ezekiel 38.
Huh?
Ezekiel 38, I think that's talking about after the millennium.
Well, yeah, see, I would disagree with that because, you know,
But it seems like
the nations are all right there. Gog and Magog, though, are one of the reasons people think it's after the millennium because
Well, it's not just, it's not, in other words, it's like from the four corners of the earth.
Uh-huh.
They're gonna say, just go up to the unwalled city.
yeah, and that's not Israel today.
Pardon?
That's not Israel today, is it?
That's why I say it would have to be in the millennium. After.
Not
At the
necessarily.
end of the millennium.
Here's the case that I'm building. When the Psalm 83 battle takes place, hold on, I am for a reason. When the Psalm 83 battle takes place, the immediate enemies around Israel are going to be vanquished. Israel will survive, but there's evidence that Israel will be decimated, but they will survive. Yeah, the fatness of Jacob shall wax lean. They'll be like the olive when the branches have been beaten, but there's a few olives left on it. After the harvest has been made, the gleanings are there. But Israel survives. The ones around them don't. Now, just speculation. This is pure speculation on my part.
So is on mine.
Yeah, my speculation is this. When that takes place, the world is going to be in such turmoil, and we're going to have seen a regional nuclear war take place. And there's going to be things happening elsewhere, because more likely than not, Iran will try to attack us. Possibly China and North Korea would participate in that. And that could be the electromagnetic pulse attacks against us. They got sleeper cells here, not just us, but also do things in Europe and all. But in the midst of the chaos, if a world leader came in and said, listen, I can guarantee peace. Let's sign this 7-year thing. You lay down your arms and we'll take care of you. This could set up Israel as the land of unwalled villages, living, thinking they're in peace because For 7 years, they're going to be guaranteed peace. The world has come together and said, we'll guarantee your peace. And this man, the prince of the people that destroyed the temple, the Antichrist, is going to say, I'll guarantee peace. I give you 7 years. Just lay down your weapons and let us take care of you. And if Israel, the fatness of Jacob, is made lean, they may think, this is the only choice we have if we're going to survive. And so they set up a protection zone there. And then what happens during that time, the Antichrist, he's got 7 years. That started now. And we know that during the 7 years, the beginning of the 7 years, the seven sealed book begins to be unsealed. And the first 4 seals, the first one is the rider on the white horse in Revelation chapter 6, who goes out conquering, but he's got a bow with no arrows in it. And he's a leader on a white horse, which symbolizes military and superiority, or conquering leader. And if that's the Antichrist, that could be bringing in this rumor of peace. And everybody follow me. I've got the might, I've got the power, and we can guarantee peace. But then he's shortly followed by the red horse of war, which I believe could very well be the Ezekiel 38 battle, because in the beginning of the tribulation, we know the world is supposed to be divided up into 10 kingdoms, and all these one world government proposals, the majority of them seem to center on dividing the world into 10 regions. And one of those regions would have Russia and that part of the world, which is where Gog and Magog are located. And they look to Israel and they desire to come down and plunder it in Ezekiel 38. But other parts, don't go along. That could be, in a sense, a challenge to the Antichrist during the beginning of his reign. And again, speculation, if that takes place, that would account for the prophecies of Ezekiel 38. That would account for the prophecies of Psalm 83. That would account for some of these other things that we were looking at with the destruction of Damascus, the destruction of Egypt. It would set the stage for all of that. And it would also fit in the window of the Antichrist coming. And then, but regardless of where the battles fit in, the Antichrist comes, confirms the covenant for 7 years. And in the midst of that, let me get back to Daniel chapter 9. In the midst of that, he says in Daniel 9, verse number 26, verse number 27, and he shall confirm the covenant with many for 1 week. There's your 7 years. And in the midst of the week, he shall cause the sacrifice and oblation to cease. And for the overspreading of abominations, this is what is asked about the abomination of desolations. Jesus referred to this, the abominations of desolation spoken of by Daniel the prophet. This is it. He shall cause the sacrifice and oblation to cease, and for the overspreading of abominations, he shall make it desolate, even unto the consummation, and that determined shall be poured upon the desolate. So this is something he's going to do, making it desolate until the Lord returns to set up his kingdom. So the Antichrist goes in and commands the sacrifices and oblations to cease. Well, there's no sacrifices and oblations going on right now because there's no temple. That means the temple has to be rebuilt, right? Well, in 2 Thessalonians chapter 2, the man of sin, the son of perdition, goes into the temple in the future, because this is yet future, and he declares himself to be God. So the abomination of desolations that Daniel's speaking of here, might it be that the Antichrist at the middle of the tribulation period goes in and says, you don't need to make all these sacrifices. I'm God. Come and worship me directly. I mean, this is...
Yeah, but he has to get rid of the 2 witnesses, though.
Well, and that's when that takes place, and so it may be at that point, and that's at the same time, you have the false prophet who leads the religious system and builds the image of the beast in Revelation 13, and then causes everybody to worship and receive the mark, and if they don't receive the mark, just like the mask, you can't buy or sell, and so what I'm getting at is when Jesus said, when you see these things begin to come to pass. Now, I'm not saying that my thought of the Psalm 83 and the rise of the Antichrist and Ezekiel 38 and then all that timing is necessarily set in stone. I don't know. I'm just speculating by what I read. But what we are seeing right now is things that suggest we're seeing the beginning of those things. I think that we can agree on. Wouldn't that seem logical? We're seeing things that are beginning to take place.
Well, in 10 trial stages, look at this.
Yeah.
Telling somebody they don't have
Because the devil has to work things in advance. You know, a lot of this stuff isn't just going to be sprung out of the blue. There has to be groundwork
It
laid.
makes sense, he's not
Yeah.
omnipresent, doesn't have all knowledge.
Exactly.
He's got to test the waters to
And-
see how it.
Yeah, and so the one world people are working, laying the stage where the Antichrist can come in to a one world government. So, if there's going to be a one world government occurring soon, it would seem reasonable that there's plans in place. And guess what? There are plans in place. And we see the writings of these people. We need a global governance, a global economic system, and a global religious system. And we see the UN calling for all three. We see the Pope calling for all three. We see all these groups calling for all three.
So recently, where they're saying we're not running out of change coins.
Yeah,
Yes.
bring that up.
They're running out of change because they stopped printing, or not printing, but the minting coins because people weren't going out as much. But all of this works to a larger thing. Money carries germs. And we're all so afraid of germs that everybody's wearing a mask, so it must be something to be afraid of. Guess what? If we all agree to get rid of our money and just trust them that everything's going to be digital, no computers would ever crash, right? You don't never make a mistake. And then all you have to do is give your card. But you know that card, you could lose it, you could forget it. It can still carry germs. But if you had something just imprinted, let's say that when you get vaccinated, we'll also give you a little chip under your hand skin. Now you don't have to leave home without it. Remember Carl Malden? Never leave home without it. Well, yeah. But I mean, how many people leave the house without their right hand? Well, there are some people that don't have a hand. So a good alternative is the forehead. If you leave the house without your forehead, you're not going very far. So, so you got your right hand, you got your forehead.
I wonder why it says right hand.
Well, because that's the dominant hand, probably. Yeah.
I
So
wonder if it also, I wonder about this, is it also because when you salute with the right hand?
you salute with the right hand. You also shake hands with the right hand. So, yeah. Well, you salute with the right hand and shake hands with the right hand to show there's no weapon. You know, I'm not pulling out a sword if I have your open hand to you, or if I have my hand up, you salute. I don't have a sword.
The election will tell a lot of things.
What's that?
The election will tell us.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
We may get that far.
Yeah. So, these, again, looking at this and going with what Jesus said, when these things begin to come to pass, he didn't say we have to see them happen before our redemption. When he says our redemption draweth nigh, he's talking about us being caught up to be with him.
Which
Because-
is what sets up the total worldwide chaos.
Well, not necessarily. We could be caught up in the midst of total worldwide chaos. You know, just think about this for a second. Oh, yeah, hand over there.
Well, speaking of laying groundwork, did you hear about this Obamacare billing code ICD 93978, referring to legal execution. It's going around the internet, so it's something to look into.
What's that part of what, death panels or something? that they got?
This has to do with legal execution at their discretion. And one of the ways they do it is beheading by guillotine.
And those are constant rumors that have been around since, I've heard the guillotine rumors since the late 70s.
So it's, that was written in 2015, right before he got out of office. Snuck that in there.
Yeah, so I mean, all of this stuff, the groundwork has to be laid. But, as we've said before, also in 2 Thessalonians chapter 2, the mystery of iniquity is already working, but it's being restrained, it's being held back until the right time. And I believe it's being held back by the Holy Spirit, and He's holding it back, working through us in the world. And the moment we're taken out of the world, the ministry of the Holy Spirit is going to be altered, which means the world can plunge into chaos. What if the rapture took place in the midst of the Psalm 83 battle? The world's in confusion, and they're seeing all this. Throw in an EMP attack where nobody's radio or television or internet is working. Nobody knows what's going on. You don't know what's happening 10 miles away from yourself. And people, all kinds of people are missing, because if you were visiting California and all of a sudden all of the electronics are shut down, even temporarily, you don't know where they're at. They could be, that Christian family down the street that talked about the rapture, maybe this is it. Yeah, but that atheist family over there was visiting in California, and they're not here. Maybe they were visiting in Nevada or something or whatever. They were somewhere out of state and they're stuck too. Oh, well, that makes sense, because remember, people are going to believe a lie. How are they going to cover up all of the Christians disappearing? But we speculate because we don't know everything that's going to happen.
I was going to say, way back earlier in this whole discussion, you were talking about Truman. Is Truman generally considered a good Christian president?
He was a Baptist. I hope he was born again. Some of his other language and content didn't always suggest it, but unfortunately, and I know this unfortunately too well, that there are people who served as pastors and missionaries who use salty language too that shouldn't be used. But
What we might run up is because I'm going to bring up somebody from Hollywood. I saw a special this past winter from Oliver Stone, who totally hates Truman, and he blames him for the nuclear arms race because he dropped bombs, in Japan.
yeah, the bombs that saved lots of lives, including the life of her uncle. Yeah, because her uncle was training to be the first wave to attack the Japanese homeland, which meant he would have been gone. They expected them to none of them to survive. Yeah, but because they dropped the bombs and Japan surrendered, her uncle never had to make that invasion.
Stone considers truly weak, and he did it because he's a weak person and all that.
Well, I'm just thankful that he was there when he was there, because the vice president that was serving Roosevelt before Truman was, we know this since the fall of the end of the Cold War and the opening up of records of the East German Stasi and some of the other stuff that we have now. We know that the guy that was the vice president before Truman was basically turned by the Soviets. He was their guy.
That's Stone's hero. He wanted that guy to be president.
Well, that tells you something about Stone, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does. It does. But
Because see, remember, Roosevelt said when there was rumors about an Israeli state, the Jewish state, he said there'll be no Jewish state as long as I'm president, or we'll never recognize it. It was like a week or so later, he died suddenly. Well, had that happened before, when he had that other guy, that other guy who was a Soviet agent would have become president. The Soviets would have penetrated the Oval Office with their own man. They would have put him there. It took them a few years later to do that. Yeah. But that's where God intervened. God intervened because Truman grew up attending a Baptist church. It was his grandfather, I think, was the pastor. He always heard that the Jewish people were the apple of God's eye, that God had a plan for them, that there was going to be a Jewish state. And he saw that. Essentially, I think he saw it as his duty, that he was the man for the time to recognize it.
But the Bible promises that bless those who bless you, they're on curse those who curse you.
And so,
That explains why, after he did that, the 1950s came along, all of a sudden everybody was in business for themselves. Kind of like what Trump just got done doing.
but there's a lot of stuff that's always going on behind the scenes, and maneuvering and political shenanigans, and we never see the half of it.
Hey, one thing that always gets my attention, you talk about wars and rumors of wars and earthquakes in diverse places. The one thing always got my attention is in the last days, knowledge will explode. And to me, that means more that I'm seeing every day. I mean, I'm always hearing earthquakes and stuff, but it's really amazing in our lifetime how much technology has exploded.
Go to Zechariah chapter 12, I think it is. Oh, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, about XCR. This is really stunning. I don't know if it's true, but I watch those documentaries, and it said on Truman, FDR, that he knew when beforehand that the Japanese would attack Pearl Harbor.
Yeah, and there's also rumors that Churchill knew it too, and didn't say anything because he wanted to make sure that the Americans came in, or that FDR knew it and he wanted an excuse to get in. If he allowed it to happen, it would go in. And so there's a lot of stories that go back and forth, and it may or may not be true. It may be that he heard it but didn't believe it. Or it may be that he heard it and he thought, I could use this to my advantage. So, but I have heard rumors that he knew.
Because 80% of the American public did not do it. And then some people think that FDR was an excuse.
And it could be that he had wind of it happening and he didn't expect it to be as devastating when it attack as it was, because I don't think anybody expected it to be that devastating. And I'm trying to remember, there was actually somebody who saw it coming in. I think it radioed something out and they didn't believe it or something.
What's that?
Pearl Harbor.
The guys on the mending that radar?
Yeah, the early radar site or whatever.
That was in the movie, right?
Yeah, and they just didn't believe it. It just seemed too far fetched.
Yeah, there was recent weapons, B-17s coming in, and
Yeah.
that's that. And it's like,
That's just like on 9/11. I know from friends who are still in the Air Force who are on active duty at 9/11 that we knew something was going to happen. We didn't know exactly what day, but we knew it involved airplanes and buildings. But we didn't. There's a lot of buildings on the East Coast of the United States, and we knew the East Coast of the United States. So it's kind of impossible to guard every building on the East Coast of the United States. Even if you say, well, okay, let's set a guard on certain key areas, it's still a lot of areas. And they had rumors. What they didn't expect was American airliners shortly after taking off being turned into, weapons, and in a sense, guys. And so they knew something was coming. They just didn't know exactly where and when. And so many of the military bases on the East Coast went on exercise status. And I remember when I was in the Air Force, exercises sometimes were used as a way to ramp up base security and a way to ramp up other things that you can do under the guise of an exercise so that nobody knows why you're really doing it. Because sometimes you get a rumor of something that you have reason to believe may or may not be true. You don't want to panic everybody and all that. So you say, we're having an exercise. Yeah. When they bombed Libya, remember when Reagan bombed Libya? Now, I was stationed in England when that happened. The tankers flew over our base. The bombers flew over our base. I know people who from another base who loaded the bombs. And so the night that they were flying down there, I was going to a Bible Institute that was run by missionaries that were working in England. There was several missions works around several major bases, American air bases. And these missionaries got together and they formed a Bible Institute so that people like myself who felt called into the ministry could start studying. And so the night that they were flying to pay Gaddafi a visit, the people that were from, I think it was Upper Hayford where the tankers were based, and Milford where the F-100s or the bombers were based and all. But at any rate, they weren't there. And we said, and well, there was a couple people from some of those bases, but the other guys weren't there. And we said, where's the other guys at? And they said, oh, we have an exercise going on and they can't leave. Now, myself and the other guy that was with me, we both worked in the same secure area. He worked in a different office where he worked with some other people, and I worked where I was. And basically, between the two of us, if there was an exercise involving any of the bases in the UK, we would have known. And we looked at each other and kind of said quietly, "There's no exercise going on. You heard of anything?" "Oh, I didn't hear of anything. Something's going on." Well, they use an exercise to cover the fact they mobilized these big fleets of bombers and tankers. Because they flew them over the Atlantic through the Straits of Gibraltar because France would not let us overfly.
Oh, I remember that.
So they had to station ahead of the bombers tankers, KC-135 tankers. They had to station them out by Gibraltar so that when the bombers got there, they could refuel before flying to Libya and back. And then they had to fly in another wave of tankers so that after they visited Gaddafi, they could tank up again before heading back to the UK. So it was covered with exercise. And I'm sure maybe some of you guys in the Navy, some of your days, you did some exercises from time to time, if you remember. But well, they were having exercises all up and down the Atlantic seaboard at military bases. And by doing that, they ramped up base security. They had the opportunity to put people out with live weapon ammunition in their weapons that normally they wouldn't have. And all of that was because they expected something. So it's not like we heard something was coming and did nothing. We had a lot of preparation made. And
you talking about that they knew Japan?
Well, that's the speculation. Some people say that. And
well, that's been proven.
Yeah.
Bill Mitchell.
Okay.
In,
yeah.
And then there was Pete Ellis before that.
Mm-hmm.
They went over and studied the perimeters. In fact, Pete Ellis, he went on the island of what was it? Saipan. Anyway, the Japanese caught him. He was a spy.
Uh-huh.
And he somehow got the news out to them.
That they were planning that?
That what he predicted is they were
Uh-huh.
fortifying the island. And he said they would attack Pearl Harbor or Midway, wherever the fleet was.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And And they knew that long time ago. Then Billy Mitchell, he went over there and he studied the same thing. And he predicted that he said the same thing. And they told him to keep quiet about it.
Uh-huh.
And he didn't. It's in the encyclopedia.
Yeah.
And so they court-martialed him and they sent him over to Alaska. And he built the telegraph in Valdez, from the people of Alaska. I own some property up there. And they had to use all that stuff.
Yeah. Yeah.
But anyway, Billy Mitchell predicted that. And the Japanese knew it too, because they had a force against Russia on the other side.
Yeah.
But when they found out that the Russians knew that the Japanese were fortifying all that, they took all them men out. They were on skis and white float, and they put them all on the European side because they knew that Japan would never attack them. They could protect them.
United States, yeah.
And that's where we got some of that information.
Yeah, and what he was saying is there's a radar site that actually saw them coming in and tried to warn, and they were, what was it you said they were?
Yeah, they said there was E-17s were coming in.
Yeah, so
apparently those were heading for Midway.
So there's, and whatever the reasons for the cover-up and all that, but again, it's stuff happening.
He wanted to get, Roosevelt wanted to get
In the war, and
he
Churchill
promised
wanted
the
in the
mothers
war.
that their sons would not go to war. He would not get involved in the European war.
Yeah,
But
but
after
of course,
that,
that's not the first time, because remember Woodrow Wilson ran on the ticket, he kept us out of war, and then promptly got us into World War I.
I got a lot of information. Because I was one of the guys that went and dug up the Earhart and something.
Yeah.
And in fact, they wrote a book on it.
Yeah,
And
you're
brought
talking
her
about
body
that.
back.
Yeah.
And that had a lot to do with her flying. Her and Newman was supposed to fly. And like you say, it's a long story.
Yeah. One of these days, maybe we'll get to heaven, we'll be able to find out some of these things that took place that never really knew and maybe just suspected, but we're after 9 o'clock right now, so we need to go ahead and pray. And,
Oh, yeah.
we get 2 hours in and then we're still ready to go more, but at some point we have to. That's why we'll wind up talking afterwards for a while too. So, but let's go ahead and pray. We'll officially end right there. So, let's pray. Heavenly Father, Lord, I want to thank you again for the opportunity to come together tonight, talk about these things. And Lord, we may speculate about certain things. A lot of things we may completely miss the mark when we speculate, but we do know certain things. Excuse me. We know that there is a spiritual war taking place around us, and we know that the mystery of iniquity is working in the world right now. We know the devil is trying to arrange things so that he can bring to power the Antichrist and try to oppose Christ in every way possible. But we also know that ultimately Jesus Christ is victorious and will set up his throne here on earth. He'll rule and reign over this world for 1,000 years, and we'll be a part of that administration that he'll set up. Father, help us to be faithful in the work that you've given us to do. We also know that our time, however much time we have, we need to be busy doing the work you've given us to do, that we can reach people with the gospel, that we can see people come to know Christ, to experience salvation, to have their sins forgiven, and that those also can be caught up to be with us in the air, that we can come back victorious with Christ. Lord, there's also many people who are going to be left behind. There's many people who are going to go through some of these things. Help us, Lord, to be diligent to do what we can to reach as many of them as possible before we're taken up to be with you. Bless now, Lord. Watch over us as we leave here. Keep us safe on the roads. Bless the day tomorrow. And then we do pray that you would bless the day Sunday for your glory. Also want to ask your blessing on the memorial service for Bruce Musselman tomorrow as well. Just pray these things in Jesus' name. Yeah. Real quick announcement, just thought about that. Should have mentioned that earlier. Those of you who are following Bruce Musselman's memorial service, tomorrow, 10 o'clock, Cleveland Baptist Church, 10 to 12. And so that's still in the plan, in the works. So,
You think it's gonna be surrounding church officials?
Pastor Pete Folger has stated that Cleveland Baptist Church policy is that essentially what we said, although he didn't use that line of reasoning, he said that they will not let the governor dictate what you do inside the church house.
And Pete Folger's, his son, did his father retire?
Yeah, his father, Kevin Folger, is now retired as the pastor, and his son Pete Folger is there. So he's the third pastor. Of course, Roy Thompson, of course, started it, then Kevin Folger grew up in the church.
Yeah.
And then his son grew up in the church too, and they're doing pretty good.
Yeah.
They've had good succession.
Yeah.
You know, some churches, they really go through the ringer with this succession, especially some that have been here a long time.
Yeah.
But they made it, they did it well. And
Said, rumors of wars and places, and then after that.
No, I was saying that, Matthew, on the last days,
let me close over here.
Just like Daniel 12:4.
Take care. God bless. We're going to sign off on here. So have a good evening. Good night.
we've seen an awful lot. I remember Diamond, taking phone calls, and now we get